Salvete omnes. Welcome to the AP Latin live stream. We're so excited to have you with us here today. My name is Jenny Luongo, and I teach at St. Andrew's Episcopal School here in Austin, Texas.
And I'm Benjamin Johnson, and I teach at Hamden Academy in Hamden, Maine. And we'd just like to welcome you to this episode of AP Latin on YouTube. We're going to be covering Book 6 of Caesar's Gallico, chapters 13, we didn't quite finish yesterday, and chapter 14. And that's content that's going to be on the AP exam. But I want to let you know that at some point in the future, we are going to be covering content that's new than isn't on the AP exam. And part of that is because colleges, when we went to this abbreviated format for the test, which is 45 minutes long, and for Latin, we're only doing in the course description the first 4 units. Part of that was because we would be doing these live streams covering some new content. So that will happen in the near future. I want to let you guys know that it's good for you to cover some stuff too. I mean, hopefully you'll enjoy it and it'll be as entertaining as these are.
Ben and I really have carefully selected that material so that we can make sure that not only will you get to read some more Latin, which is good for your soul, but also we'll be working on the skills, continuing to work on the skills that you're going to need for the AP Latin exam. That full calendar will be published soon, and you'll be able to see what we're planning to teach every day, and then we'll start reviewing mid-April. And those reviews will continue on and through May 1st, and you can decide kind of what you want to see. If you ever miss an episode, I know you'll be so sad. Don't worry, you can watch them whenever you want to on YouTube, or if you just want to watch an episode over again to help yourself review for the exam, or if you've got classmates who haven't been able to join us at this time, then they can watch it again. So we'll talk a little bit about what we are going to do today. As Ben said, we did not finish chapter 13 of book 6 yesterday. So we're going to, I know, we're going to continue in book 6, and then we're going to also be doing 6.14, chapter 14 today as well. So what we would recommend is that today you focus on what we're learning, and especially tune into things about morphology. Morphology has to do with the forms of words. And when we want to talk today about how form in Latin tells us information about translation in English. So we'll be working on that skill today. We're also going to tell you a little bit more about ourselves too, so buckle up for that. So we have the same resource folder we'll be using for all of these live streams. I want to give a shout out to the AP Latin teaching community who has been so generous about sharing materials. Sometimes we will put things in the folder that other people have shared. Sometimes we may not, just because we're trying to kind of curate a limited amount of material, but I can't tell you how generous the teachers all around the country and the world have been with this project. So we really appreciate that. So in that folder, you're going to find a closed translation, a fill-in-the-blank translation for today. You're going to find links for this lesson. You will want to have out probably something to write with again. We're always going to try to make it interactive in that we're going to ask you questions. You might want to write your answers down or write notes down. You may want to have out other materials like your textbook. And then you might want to go ahead and have those closed translations ready.
Close with a Z, of course.
Close with a Z, yes, okay. Yes. So that you can fill them in.
We're not playing Kahoot today, though, are we, Jenny?
No.
That's okay.
That is a bummer. But we want to tell you guys that we learned a lot from trying to do Kahoot yesterday. We will continue to work on how to deal with the lag because we definitely want to make this interactive and get feedback from you guys. We've got some ideas for tomorrow and for next week. But I did set up a Kahoot challenge for anybody who didn't get into the game yesterday or who just wants to play that again, because there was some challenging ablative usage in there. And so that's linked to the homework assignment that was from today. And it's also in the general links file for this lesson. And that Kahoot challenge is available through April 22nd. And it's not timed for those of you who just like, time to think about those heavy grammar points. So that's there for you today. We don't have time for anything like that today because we're so jam-packed. So we'll just get it going.
All right, tu es regina Kahoot torum, right?
Well, I don't know if I can claim that. I don't know if I can claim that.
Hey, Jenny. Quod annos tu docuisti. I here we don't have translations for you guys, but I want you to think about what maybe this means. Maybe for quod annos, for how many years, an accusative of extent of time, have you taught?
Oh, Ben. Docui vicenos septenos annos sum vetus. So in the work we're going to do today, we're going to encounter some of these special numbers. They're called distributive numbers. And vicenos septenos, I've taught for 27 years. At 2, Ben. Quote annos docuisti.
At 2, it sounds like I'm stabbing you or something like that.
Well, you did make me reveal how long I've been teaching online.
That's true. That's true. Docui nondum vicenos, sed duo de vicenos annos. So duo de vicenos, if you know your numbers, you maybe think that duo de viginti is 2 from 20. So duo de vicenos is 18 annos. Ego quoque vetus sum. Quo discendi causa profecta es? So to where did you go? Causa discendi, for the sake of learning. That's a nice gerund phrase with causa, a post, I call them, instead of a preposition, it comes after a postposition. It's a complicated word. We don't have time to get into why it's that way. Just accept that it takes a genitive.
Sed est, but it is. Yeah. So yeah, that phrase, discendi causa profecta sum, or whatever form, is going to appear in our reading today. So in texatem, hook 'em horns. In texatem discendi causa profecta sum. Et tu, Ben? Quo tu discendi causa profectus est?
I like how, before we go on, I like how we have different genders for profectus sum and profectus est. Just to remind you guys that a deponent verb like this, you can identify the gender of the subject, even though it's active. So that's not something you can normally do. Well, Jenny, in novum eboracum discendi causa profectus sum. So I don't know if you know what Eboracum is, but it's a city in northern Britain that we call York today. So Novum Eboracum is New York, and I have for my own students out there, they think I talk way too much about this. So here we go, guys. I don't. I honestly don't. They're the ones that talk about it all the time. Rub it in my face. So, okay. So one of the things that we had to do that we asked you guys to do, and I know that you might be missing this, is a little bit of homework, or what do we call it, Jenny?
They're learning opportunities.
Right, okay, right. Learning opportunities outside of school. So it was this, which is an exam practice, something from a previous AP exam. This is from De Bello Gallico, Book 1, Chapter 3. And I'm not going to read through the text here, but you might see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th word is orgetorigus, which is our Helvetian or Jeterix And he's the guy who's in charge of the Helvetians and gets them to agree to leave their land, which in the ancient world was where Switzerland is today. And so they say that, well, I think it's because or according to Caesar, of course, Caesar says that it's because their land was too narrow and they didn't have enough space, and they thought that they were better than all of the Gauls, and they could easily conquer all of Gaul if they had the right sort of conspiracy. And there's like this triumvirate possibility that's there too. It's very, I kind of wonder if Caesar's projecting a little bit. And so this passage is about how their plan for setting out and going into Gaul, and that's where he runs into the Helvetians run into Caesar and his forces. Orgetorix doesn't quite make it that far. So we have 5 questions here, roganda, and so let's move to the answers. You guys should get your learning opportunity out and check to see if you got everything right. So in line,
The good thing about this learning opportunity, though, is that there's no grade. So it really is just to see if you are learning the things you need to learn for the AP exam that's coming.
yeah, please don't email us asking for grades.
No, we're
we don't
not
have the
grading.
time. No. So Jenny, you want to go
All
over
right.
this? There
Sorry. Thank you.
That's good. Yeah.
So in lines 1 through 2, constituerunt ea quae ad proficiscendum pertinerent comparare. What did the Helvetians decide to do? And it says they decided to gather or obtain comparare all the things which ea quae they needed ad proficiscendum, to set out. We were just talking about that word, set out, that Caesar likes to use.
What type of word is that? That's has an ND in it, right? So
yes, so it is a gerund here,
not a
ad
gerundive, right?
proficiscendum, because it doesn't have any sort of object with it, so it's just a
good.
gerund.
Okay.
All right, so number 2, some more grammar fun. Identify the grammatical construction of ut in itinere copia frumenti subpeteret. So we talked about this construction yesterday, but yesterday it was started with a ne because people were doing something not to suffer any inconvenience from contact with the people who had been socially distanced. But today, the Helvetians are doing this in order to do something. So this is a purpose clause. So if you see ut plus the thing that people are trying to do, they did it so that a supply of grain was ready for them on their journey, then that's a purpose clause. And then number 3, according to lines 4 through 5, ad eas conficiendas biennium sibi satis esse duxerunt. Biennium is what you should focus in on when you're looking at how much time did the Helvetians estimate it would take them to get ready. It was a 2-year period. And since we were just talking about a gerund, I'll point out that ad eas conficiendas, because there is a word agreeing with conficiendas, there is an object, that's a gerundive phrase. So
those always mix my students up, and so I was like, is this a gerund or a gerundive? And they're like, yes, it's one of those.
It is one.
It is
it
one.
Is one.
So okay, question 4, translate, speaking of which phrase, translate the phrase ad eas res conficiendas in line 6, which, this is a different location, even if it's Caesar repeats himself, and identify the verb form of conficiendas. So for accomplishing these things, and as Parwa said, conficiendas is a gerundive because it has an object when you translate it, and it's functioning here as an adjective, agreeing with res. So adjective is a gerundive is an adjective. If you sometimes remember that, stress the if part, and that might help you out. And then finally, to whom does the sibi refer? So is sibi legationem ad civitate suscepit. So we're talking about, so Orgetorix is chosen in the previous sentence for accomplishing these things. And that is there is Orgetorix. He takes up this embassy to the nearby states, nations, for himself, sibi. And sibi is one of those reflexive third person pronouns. So it's the same as the subject, as I like to do. And that reinforces that say, sui, sui, sibi, say is the same as the subject because they all begin with the same letter, and that is alliteration. Okay, so hope you enjoyed that learning opportunity. Is that what you call it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that learning opportunity. Yeah. So we're going to start off with, because we have to jump straight into the Latin here because we have so much. We have to finish up chapter 13, then we have to do chapter 14. And so let's go to this, and we were previously talking about the Druids and all of the fun things. And so 13 is going to continue talking about them, and so is 14. So this first section we have here talks about what happens when like the chief druid guy happens to die. So the questions here, the roganda, what verb requires his omnibus druidibus to be in the dative case? So we're telling you that it's in the dative. What are the two things that might happen if the chief druid has died? And then what is the term for a double negative, like non nunquam? So we'll give you about 15 seconds of awkward silence so you can kind of think about those things. Okay, so in
Don't you
this
think we
past,
need the Jeopardy music, Ben?
I know
I feel like the Jeopardy music could add to this.
that's 30 seconds long. I mean, we'd have to cut it in half.
All
We
right,
should
all right,
we
all
should
right.
ask them for copyright.
Right, exactly,
Use.
exactly.
So okay, so in this passage we're talking about the fact that unus praest his omnibus druidibus. So there's one guy who qui summam inter eos habet auctoritatem, who has the authority over all the others. And so the first question asks about the his omnibus druidibus, and it's in the dative because praest, which means in charge of, takes its object in the dative case. Often a lot of these verbs that have prefixes at the beginning, that prefix, if it changes the meaning of the word enough, will take its object in the dative rather than the accusative. But if this guy dies, hoc mortuo, which is an ablative absolute, if you remember from yesterday, then we have an issue because we don't know who's going to succeed him. So if there's one guy who's obvious, then he gets chosen, and that's the si qui. So remember, after si nisi numine, Ali takes a holiday or a hike, depending on what you like. And so this guy, if anyone, si qui, excellit dignitate, with respect to his dignity, rises above the others, then he's the obvious choice, so cated. But if there are plures pares, if there are many equals, then there's a suffragium druidum, a suffrage or a voting of druids. You know, we in America we talk about women's suffrage, which isn't them suffering; it's women gaining the right to vote, and that's how you can maybe remember what suffragium means. And so then they have a vote, which some of you might think kind of sounds familiar if you know anything about how the Pope is chosen. They have this conclave, and there's a vote, and one guy gets it. So the last thing, what's the term for a double negative, like non numquam, which means not never, and not never is like sometimes. That's a litotes. It doesn't have to be a double negative, but this could be a deliberate understatement.
All right, excellent. So we're going to look at this next section. And again, we're going to give you some roganda to ponder before we go over the answers. So number one, in this next part of 6.13, what's the best literal translation for habetur?
Ooh, that sounds familiar, doesn't it?
I was going to say, those of you who listened yesterday probably remember this. If you didn't listen yesterday, and so you're confused now, then there's always, the opportunity to go back and listen. And number two, why might people other than Druids come to this convention? We're talking about a convention of the Druids that happens in Finibus Carnutum, in the boundaries of the Carnutes. And then number three, what case are decretis judiciisque in line 3, and why are they in that case? So we'll give you that awkward pause now. All right, so yesterday we talked about the fact that habetur in the passive really means is considered. So when the Druids gather in loco consecrato in a sacred place in finibus carnutum, in the boundaries of the carnutes, certo tempore, at a certain time, again, another appellate of time that we talked about yesterday, ani of the year, they pick this place because this regio, this region, habetur, is considered media, the middle part, totius Gallii. So it's convenient to everybody. And why is that important? Why might people other than Druids come to this convention? It says omnes, all qui who controversias habent, who have controversies or issues that need resolved, conveniunt, come together. And then at the very end, we've got this phrase, decretis judiciisque parent. Parent looks like the English word parent, right? And it means they obey. So they obey decretis judiciisque, their decrees and judgments. And the reason that it needs to be in the dative case and not the accusative is because pareo is a special kind of verb. It's got a special grammar term, which is fun to say, intransitive. And just what that means is that it's not going to take an accusative object. Instead, it's going to take a dative. So there we go.
Yeah, I believe, and that I'm just recalling this, that the Romans, maybe Varro, thought that the word parentes, which is Latin for parents, came from parent because that's
Right.
what children are supposed to do to their parents. And I mean, we all know that that's not what happens.
No, it's not.
And it actually, parentes comes from pario, which means to produce or give birth, which is
Yeah, it's a good kind of way to remember pareo. It's one way that my students kind of remember, but pareo with an eo means to obey. But yeah,
beware of
Ben is
false
right.
etymologies, right?
Exactly. It comes from par-io, to bear. Yep.
Okay, so continuing on, Britannia is going to be featured in this section. So these roganda, to help you through this passage, translate in Britannia and in Galliam. Both of them are in line 1, but notice they have different endings. So that's, might have been a couple of years since we talked about this last.
Yeah, kawaii tote, discipuli. Be careful there.
Translate diligentius in line 2. What part of speech is this word? I remember going over this with my own AP class just a little bit ago. And why do people interested in Druidism set out for Britain? So why are we talking about Britain here? So awkward 15 seconds. I'll smile. Okay, here we go. So you might remember that in, when it takes the ablative case, and that's Britannia, shows location in Britain, but when in takes the accusative case, it's going to show motion towards. And so that's why in Galliam is in to Gaul. So the disciplina reperta in Britannia. So it's been found in Britain, and then translata esse. It's been transferred over to Gaul. So it's thought, existimator. And that's why we have a lot of people, well, we'll get to that in question 3. Translate diligentius in line 2. So diligentius, more strongly, more diligently, and it's a comparative adverb, which is not something you see very often. And it doesn't look comparative because often we're used to seeing words that have an eor in it. But when it's a comparative adverb, it's going to look more like that neuter comparative with the ius. So just beware of that. It shows up several times in the AP syllabus and in Latin when you're reading it in general. And since it's a comparative adverb, then that's why we have the ly ending. And then people go to Britain, if you're interested in Druidism, causa, discendi causa, right, for the sake of learning, because that's where it started. And then it was only transferred over into Gaul.
Okay, Yugapai discipuli, we have arrived at 6.14. So if you're, we're doing it. And so you may want to go ahead now and switch over if you're following along on a close exercise or in some other way. We have arrived. Per venemus. So the questions for this section. We learn from Caesar that many people are excited to come into this learning. So what are the tantis primiis in line 3 that Caesar mentions that urges so many people to come into this learning? And then number 2 for this section, some people become Druids on their own accord, sua sponte, Caesar tells us. But what's the other means that people might come into being a Druid or Druidism? All right, awkward pause. All right, let's go ahead and go over these because we got to finish 6.4, kids. All right, it's like one of those days in Latin class when your teacher's like, come on, we have a lot to do.
Right. No chit chat.
No chit chat, let's go. All right, so tantis primiis. Caesar mentions that some of the rewards for being a Druid are consuerunt. They are accustomed, they've been accustomed ab esse ab bello, to be absent from war so they don't have to fight. Also, pendant neque pendant. They don't pay tributa, taxes. What an incentive, really. Una cum reliquis with the rest of the people. They also have habent immunitatem, immunity, really omnium rerum for all things, like for any kind of public service. And he mentions again, they have this release vacationem militii for military service. So it's kind of emphatic that like that's a real incentive. So it says excitati tantis primiis et sua sponte multi conveniunt in disciplinam et. So there's one other way besides the people who come just because of those rewards. Mittuntur. They are sent a parentibus by their parents propinquisque and their relatives, who probably are sending them to Druid school because they want a better life for them based on these rewards.
Okay, this is a rather interesting passage, and I want you to think about this, park it a little bit. We'll come back to the ideas that are addressed in here at the end of this presentation. I think we'll have time. So it's long. This is really long. So maybe we'll give you an awkward like 16 seconds this time. To roganda though. So we've got how long might some. So non nulli. That's in line 1 there, right at the end of that line. How long do they remain in this study? And you might remember from the beginning of this presentation, like we talked about something like this and so forth. So how good is your memory? I mean, those openings aren't entirely random. And number 2, why do they a discere commit to memory? So many verses, and that's such a loaded question because kind of the whole rest of the passage is kind of about that, but I'll give you that 16 seconds here to ponder everything. Okay, hope you enjoyed your extra second. So the key word here is vikenos, for 20 years. It doesn't say that everyone spends 20 years in their study. It says that non nulli, which previously we talked about non numquam, which means not never. Here non nulli means not none, and so we might think about translating that as some. So some even stay there for 20 years. And they learn a magnum numerum versuum. Love that 4th declension genitive plural. So they learn a great number of verses. And the sentence after that, after talking about the 20 years, is talking about how they don't think that it's right to trust these things down in writing. This fas esse existimant, ea litteris mandare. We have this cum clause, and this is a cum adversative clause. So cum can usually be translated as when or while when it's introducing a clause like this. Every so often it means since, but a couple of times it means although, and so it sets up this contrast to what came before. And we learn from Caesar that the Druids and the Gauls really, but I think it's mostly the Druids because they're the educated class, they utantur Graecis literis, so they use Greek letters in reliquis fere rebus, both the publicis and the privatis rationibus. So in their accounts, their public accounts of the things that relate to the state and the nation, and the things that relate to their private matters. They use Greek letters. They don't use Greek and Greek words, just the letters themselves. And so Caesar's going to then say like, well, this id mihi, to me, he thinks that they don't like writing things down, duabus de causis, for two reasons. And this is getting to question 2. And so we have two things. So the first part is this neque in vulgum disciplinam eferi velent. So they don't really want all of this information to be transmitted to the common people. Like that would be bad, according to the Druids, and maybe even to Caesar. We talked about the plebes yesterday, and it's worth maybe going back and reviewing that maybe before we get to the end of this week. And kind of shows you what people think about that lower class that makes up 90 to 99% of the population in Gaul, in Italy, and everything like that. And then we also have this second thing that's a little bit more interesting. Neque eos qui discunt, those who are learning, literis confisos minus memoriae studere, so that they don't have their memory impacted, trusting way too much in actual letters. So they think that this last bit here, that it happens to very many, accidit plerisque, that when you start reading, your memory just kind of goes. I mean, just why bother remembering anything if it's on a piece of paper? So,
or you can look on your phone.
Or you can write. Google Translate always works, right?
Yes, yes. All right, so this next section, we're going to talk a little bit about the beliefs of the Druids. So question 1 to focus on, in particular, chiefly, what does Caesar say the Druids believe about life after death? And number 2, what are the other things that Druids teach about? So we'll give you some pause time. All right, so they say in premis chiefly that animas, souls non interire, don't die, sed, but post-mortem, after death, transire, they pass ab aliis ad alios, from one body to another. And they think this is good, that they believe this, because putant, they think that it maxime, most greatly, urges them on, excutari, ad virtutem, to courage, to manliness, metu mortis neglecto, another one of those great ablative absolutes in Caesar, with the fear of death neglected. So what are some of the other things tradunt and disputant that they are handing down and putting out there, believing? They talk about multa, many things de sideribus, about the stars atque eora motu and their motion. So astronomy, basically. They talk about de magnitudine, about the size mundi of the earth, acterarum, and the lands, so geography, basically. They talk about de rerum natura, so the nature of things, the natural world. And they talk about de vi ac potestate, about the strength and power, de aurum immortalium, of the immortal gods. So religion, basically.
There's a typo on the slide. Uh-oh.
And now it's out there forever.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
well,
it's
de
all good.
mundi acterarum terrarium, which is another typo, magnitudine that's not the textual citation for that.
Yeah, it's just
I'll
a little
I'll take the
autocorrect.
blame. Right, autocorrect. Yeah, I mean, the thing about souls don't die. I mean, that brings up the interesting bit in book 6 of the Aeneid about transmigration of souls and how we have this transferring of things. It's very Lucretian, which also brings up this de rerum natura. Lucretius, this Roman poet who's around in Caesar's times, or Caesar's around in Lucretius's time, wrote a poem about the natural world and physics called, that we call now, de rerum natura. So it's maybe an interesting little tie-in to going beyond the AP syllabus. So don't worry about that, guys. Okay.
Ben, can you
Did we
believe
get
that
it?
we did it?
I think
We've
we
done
did.
it.
Holy
Yes.
cow. And we have 10
Yeah.
minutes to spare too.
Okay, so we're going to
Okay.
speed through this check for understanding, but we're doing great. We're doing great. Well done, kids.
What are we doing here? What is this check? I don't want to go to the next slide.
Oh, it's going to say exerceamus, I believe.
Oh, okay, there we go. Oh,
Yeah.
let us exercise. I'll get my my
yeah.
tracksuit and my weights out, right?
Possum videre futura. I can see future things. So exerceamus, let's practice. Again, we're kind of going low tech today because we knew we were going to be short on time. So we're going to go to the next slide and get a question for you. And it's going to be a quick little multiple choice review of some of the morphology, or again, forms that translate into meaning. So
using the forms to help you figure out the right translation, right?
Exactly.
How much wait time are we going to give them? 10 seconds?
Oh, let's 5 or 10 seconds.
5 or 10 seconds.
This will be quick.
Okay, here we go. Okay.
All right. So first question: what's the best translation for Druides a bello ab esse consuerunt? Is it A, it was customary for Druids to be absent from war? B, the Druids were accustomed to be absent from war? Or C, it's customary for Druids to be absent from war?
5 seconds. Okay, you guys got it? Here we go.
And the answer is B. So hopefully, again, we're focusing on paying close attention to forms today. Hopefully you saw that NT on the end of consuerunt, which tells us that it has a plural subject. So he, she, or it isn't going to work for that one, right? So it's got to be that the Druids were accustomed. All right, let's try another one. I think you were supposed to read those.
I was supposed to go that one. Yeah, we can.
I got excited.
I'll do 2 in a row. How about that?
Okay, sounds perfect.
Okay, yeah, and just to let you guys know about consuerunt, it could be translated to present. There's probably a present sense here. The Druids are accustomed, but that's okay. Yeah, we want to test you on morphology. Okay, number 2, what is the best translation for magnum numerum versuum e discere docuntur? A, they say that they learn a great number of verses. B, they say they learn verses large in number. And C, they are said to learn a great number of verses. 5 seconds. Okay, it's C, guys. I hope you got that. The morphology here that you can look at is magnum numerum versuum. So magnum numerum is in the accusative case, but versuum is genitive plural, so a great number of verses. And the decuntur is the NTUR, that's passive and third person plural. So they are said rather than they say. So that I hope that you guys got. And let me do this next one here. What is the best translation for neque fas esse existimant? A, nor are they thought to be right. B, and they think it is not right. Or C, they thought it had not been wrong. 2 seconds. 1. It's B, and they think it is not right, the neque fas. And the existimant, it's present tense. That's the ANT ending there with the they as the subject. And this is an indirect statement, I believe, with the fas esse, and that's why esse is in the infinitive form. And yet we're still translating as is in the translation. So just because you see an infinitive doesn't necessarily mean you have to translate it in that to form.
All right, here we go. What's the best translation? Let's see if they remember what you told them earlier, Ben. For cum Graecis litteris utantur. A, although they use Greek letters. B, when they are used by Greek letters. Or
Ooh,
C,
I hate when that happens.
since Greek letters are used.
I hate when those Greek letters use me.
Me too, man.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so hopefully you remembered that we were talking about how cum means although here. So we just talked about paying attention to passive versus active endings, but now we've thrown this tricky one at you.
Oh, what is that? Oh, what is that?
Utor is a deponent verb, so even though utantur has that tur ending, it looks passive. We're still going to translate it actively, utantur. And then also utor, you might have learned the puffy verbs are followed by an ablative of means or followed by the ablative case. So we don't need an ablative word to translate it. We just say they use Greek letters.
Oh, this is the worst, isn't this? Like all
Yes,
three
all the
really bad things
things,
together. Okay, the
all the
last one,
things.
guys, the last one. What is the best translation for id mihi instituisse videntur? Is it this is seen as me having established? This seems to me to have been established. They seem to me to have established this. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. See, they seem to me to have established this. So videntur, again, it looks passive. You might think that you should be translating this as the passive form of to see, but I mean, hopefully by now you know that video and the passive is better in English as seem. So they seem, that they form here. And we're translating the infinitive here like an infinitive, instituisse, to have established this. And the passive form of video is often followed by a dative, and that's the mihi here. Okay, so I think the debrief and summary. So we have a question. We didn't quite get to the questions yesterday, but I did want to have you guys think about this, ponder this at least. Something that's interesting that came up here in one of the sections that I did is that the Druids think that reading causes a loss of memory. So the question that we want you to think about is, do you think that computers, Google, et cetera, are destroying memory in the same way that Druids thought literacy might? You know, you can look anything up on your phone or a computer now. So why bother remembering anything? And then just to kind of give you a little bit more information or context or background, there's a story similar to this in Plato in the Phaedrus, the story of Teut. Teut is the inventor of writing for the Egyptians. And so he came to Thomas and presented him with this writing. He also invented like other things like geometry and all these other fun arts, astronomy and stuff. And Thomas says that he tells Teut that like all your other stuff is great, but this writing thing, like it's really bad because you know, people think that they will be better off and that they'll be smarter and all this stuff by having this ability to do stuff, but it's going to make them worse. It's going to affect their memory, and they will think that they're smarter than they actually are. They will appear to be omniscient and will generally know nothing. They will be tiresome company, having the show of wisdom without the reality. So a little bit of some alternate classical trivia there to help you think about this. This is not something that we're going to be asking you about next week, though.
You know, Ben, we talked about how sum vetus, how I'm old at the beginning of this. And I find that I do worry about my ability to memorize things. And so since I'm having to hand wash so much these days, I'm
Yeah.
working on memorizing things while I wash my
Okay.
hands.
That's
Try to keep
that's good practice.
try to keep my brain active.
Speaking of practice, right?
Yes,
How can we get
exactly.
these kids to be a little bit more active?
Speaking of practice, good transition. Go ahead.
Okay, so your homework for tonight, your learning opportunities, I guess.
Yes.
There we go. We want you to think about morphology a little bit and how that relates to translation. So this is a section that we covered today. And we have 5 chunks or singular words that we want you to figure out how to translate based off of their form. So this is in the resource folder, right, Jenny?
It is. It is
And
already there
so
for
you
them.
don't have to pause this and write everything down. Go to that resource folder, grab it, and then just spend 5, 10, 15, 2 hours working on this, and bring that to class tomorrow at 6 p.m. Same Latin time, same Latin channel, right?
Right. And
Oh,
I will say, I always tell my students, Don't ever spend that long on a short homework assignment. If you're
2 hours? That's
confused,
too long?
yeah, too long for this. If you're confused, then just bring it and we're going to totally explain everything in class tomorrow. So
Hopefully.
again, that's the plan. That's the plan, Amike. Everything you need is in that resource folder. And we just have one more quick announcement that I want to let you know about. The College Board is aware that not all students have access to the internet or to a device to take these AP exams on at home. So we're working on solutions to help you guys get what you need to show your best work. If you need mobile tools or connectivity, or you know someone who does, whether they're at your school or at another school, then please reach out to the College Board via this website, cb.org/tech. We want to know what you need. All right, I think that's it for today, friend.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Thank you, guys. Wash your hands. Valete omnes.
Valete.